Welcome back to another episode of Rooted in Movement, the podcast. And I am so excited to talk to you guys today because I'm going to be talking about two of my favorite things, and that is pain and the shooting sports. Mainly because many people that come to me are in pain or experience injury or have experienced some type of chronic pain throughout their life and want help resolving it. And then also from the standpoint of the shooting sports, I work with a lot of tactical athletes when it comes to high-level military, and then many of you know I do a lot of work with our United States Olympic shooting team as well. So we're going to dive deep into it. I'm going to help relate this idea to pain to the shooting sports specifically, but the information here is going to be extremely valuable for anybody, even if you aren't involved in any of the shooting sport disciplines. So mainly, I think it's going to be helpful to understand where we're coming from with a little bit of statistics, right? Because the U.S. healthcare system actually spends approximately $2 billion a year on the management of pain due to sport-related injuries alone. That's $2 billion with a B. That's a lot of money on sport-related injuries, and the shooting sports are really not exempt from this statistic at all. So beyond just the physical discomfort that the pain creates, is a huge financial burden for athletes when it comes to things like rehabilitation costs and loss of money from sponsors, or actually, winning medals in competitions for some of these high-level athletes. So these statistics are really staggering, but the fallout from pain can affect athletes at a much deeper level. Pain is also the number one reason for lost practice time and matches missed, dramatically influencing not only their athletic identity, but also mood and anxiety levels as well. So pain leads to a very vicious cycle, so to speak, of energy and time expenditure on, and quite honestly, it's wasted time and money and energy on things like imaging and surgeries, and especially like highly addictive drugs like opioids and narcotics. And when you put all this together, what you have is really a seemingly mundane part of life that's turned into an alarming epidemic. So we want to talk epidemics. We are in a very large pain epidemic, and especially in this country, because we spend so much money per GDP on pain compared to any other country, yet we're really no better at treating it than we were decades ago. That's something to chew on for a little bit. So are we really handling things most appropriately? And that's just into a whole other conversation when it comes to how our medical system is run. We're going to save that for another time. So the question I always get from people is, why do I hurt, right? So there's actually a good chance many of you listening to this essentially fall into one of two different categories. One or two different categories of an athlete, for that matter, either recreational or professional. So we either do it for fun and enjoyment and love of the particular sport or discipline or activity, or we do it professionally for money and recognition and fame, right? So I would imagine then that many of you also have probably tweaked a shoulder here or there, or experienced some type of neck or back pain at some point in your athletic career. And this pain, what it really did is it served as a protective mechanism, right? It told you something in your body was harmed and it needed to be protected. Okay, damage to tissues occurred, and those messages were then relayed to your brain to tell you that you were hurt. And to fix the issue, all you need to do was a little bit of rest and everything would get better. Until it didn't, right? So sure, the injury likely healed, and so why is there still pain involved? Why are you still feeling this discomfort and this pain? Well, I'm here to tell you that this doesn't have to be related to tissue damage at all. There does not have to be some level of pathological tissue damage for pain to be present. Pain can take away the opportunity for athletes to train and to compete, which would then go down this whole emotional roller coaster ride of how pain is experienced inside the brain, inside the body. But it shifts the mental focus from performance to perseverance. Okay, so I want you to kind of hear that again. Pain shifts the mental focus from performance to perseverance. We focus on it, right? It's unrelenting. We can't let it go. So the relationship between pain and sport training is really challenging, and it's pivotal for us to understand pain so that we can actually set aside the emotional reaction to it and reclaim a positive mindset and continue training to correct the root cause of the pain and improve other physical attributes rather than just focusing on the pain solely. Okay, so pain in and of itself seems rather simple to most, right? We think that we fall down, we break a leg, scrape a knee, that we're going to experience pain, but in actuality, there's actually a lot more going on below the surface of many of these different contexts and situations and aspects of pain that we aren't even aware of, really, for that matter. So telling people this, that, pain can be due to actual physical tissue damage or not at all, they react and respond in the way by asking a question of, well, you're telling me it's all in my head. And that seems to put the person down. We react to that pretty negatively, but it kind of is true. And the reason being is because pain is 100% always an output of the brain. So, pain was originally defined as a very unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. That's the current definition of pain, that its experience is associated with actual or potential tissue damage, meaning the threat of potential tissue damage. And this is from the International Association for the Study of Pain, the large governing body around pain. So pain is not just a simple sensation, though. In reality, it's a complex and multifaceted experience. Pain is also not inherently bad, but common and essential to the preservation of both your life and of limb. So think about this for a second. I sure wouldn't want to be that guy who can't feel his hand on a hot stove or a nail in their foot. Like, we don't ever want to not experience pain. It's a part of our human experience. And quite frankly and quite honestly, these people who can't experience pain don't live very long because we're not able to get the warning signal or the sensation that something might be going on inside the body. So rather than try and control it and wish it away, we should really be seeking to understand what pain is and actually how it affects our movement and our outlook on life. So there is a French philosopher and a scientist named René Descartes, and he actually developed the original explanation of pain and its cause. And in his description, he actually separated the brain from the body and proposed that the level of pain experience was directly related to the amount of tissue damage sustained. So now, in today's day and age, we know that this couldn't be further from the truth based on all of our research and our study of the pain experience inside the human brain, inside the human body. Okay. His thought was that the tissues of the body were relaying pain signals to the brain, and his idea aligns well with what people experience when they actually injure themselves, where, we fall down, maybe we scrape our knee, and in that moment we look down, we see blood, we see dirt in a wound, and our brain registers that as pain. Okay, but that's not always the case. That's one particular avenue from which we can actually experience pain. But I want you to think back to a training session where you smoked your upper back from all that work, or the last time your fingers went numb for shooting for so long. I've talked to people, this actually happens quite frequently, and you probably pictured images, or have been told for that matter, of ribs being out of place or discs exploding like jelly donuts from your spine. But as I've said before, your feelings are going to lie to you, and they often do. And what we know from Descartes is that this idea simply isn't true, right? There is no correlation to the physical damage that we have inside of our body and the level of pain that we experience. Like I said before, pain is 100% always an output from the brain, and the tissues of your body are relaying messages, but they themselves, the messages themselves, have nothing to do with pain. They're just signals. So these signals or these messages is sent to the brain via a process of nociception. So in nociception, we have different signals that are either chemical in nature, mechanical, or thermal in a way, and these stimulate different sensory nerve cells inside the body, which are called nociceptors. And then these nociceptors produce a signal that travels along the chain of different nerve fibers via the spinal cord and into your brain. Interestingly enough, though, nociception can occur in the absence of pain, and pain can occur in the absence of measurably noxious stimuli. Kind of like a 3-year-old cousin kicking you in the shin, which would be an example of mechanical forces being imparted onto your leg bone. Or you can think about experiencing the temperature change. So your unique temperature gauge in the shower, trying to decide whether or not it's too hot or just right, like Goldilocks. And for example, I think that when I get into the shower, my temperature gauge is a little bit different than my girlfriend's. Okay, so when I get into the shower, I perceive things as being very hot very quickly, whereas she could take it even higher because the sensory receptors inside her body just are not as sensitive to those thermal signals. Okay, and we could say that I have a different perception of heat compared to her. I grew up in Pennsylvania where it was cold most of the time versus here where she grew up in Arizona. So we can say that our contextual, environmental, cultural upbringing also has an input or imparts a place inside our pain experience. Okay, so it plays a part in how we experience pain and how we perceive it. Okay, so your tissues, these tissues are detecting the hot water or are detecting the intense pressure of being kicked in the leg. These tissues deliver information about this hot and cold stuff, the position of your body, the pressure, the loading, which could be more mechanical in nature, right? And actually even damage or inflammation, which is going to be more the chemical side of things, okay? Which we do know that if you sprain an ankle acutely, initially, you're going to experience some level of innate tissue damage of like overstretching out the ligaments on the outside of the ankle, producing a level of inflammation inside the body that swells around the ankle, puts pressure, so there's some mechanical there as well, but then also all the chemical mediators in the form of like white blood cells and cytokines that get sent to the area are more chemical in nature that tells the brain that there could be something wrong down there. Or how about all that time standing or laying prone in one position while shooting a rifle or a pistol? A lot of time under tension. I can tell you now, 3-position rifle takes about 3 hours, okay, at 50 meters. That's a lot of time of standing, kneeling, and laying prone in one position, roughly about an hour apiece. Or what about the number of rotations through the spine that you take following a clay bird in just one round of skeet or trap, let alone an entire week of competition? Think about those repetitions and how they could potentially build up. This positional nociceptive information is then relayed to the brain. And if the brain perceives this stress as large enough of a threat, that all too familiar perception of stiffness and pain may appear. It's never guaranteed, but it may appear. So that in that moment, your brain is then telling you that your tissues have surpassed their ability to cope with that particular stress, and something needs to change. Okay, something in your lifestyle or in maybe even your shooting position needs to change. Maybe we need to change the way your feet are contacting the ground. Maybe we need to change the amount of tissue tolerance to load and stress that the particular tissues of your upper and lower back have while laying in prone. This is all stuff that can actually be trained. But did you actually cause any tissue damage? Well, maybe not today, right? But if you continue long enough, the potential for injury may increase with each training session. Interestingly enough, though, MRI studies have actually failed to demonstrate any clear relationship between pathology observed on an MRI and the athlete's pain. And in fact, research shows that roughly 80% of us all show some form of nasty damage or pathology like disc herniations or degenerative disc disease or small fractures in the spinal vertebrae, but are completely pain-free. I actually worked with one powerlifter guy who had a sacrum, so that big triangular bone that connects essentially your spine into your hips and legs was actually split in half like a wedge that split it from front to back, yet felt no pain whatsoever, being completely pain-free. What this means for athletes is that it may be more helpful to forego all the expensive Polaroids and pictures and instead concentrate on working hard to strengthen tissues in a variety of different positions and postures and different loads and repetitions at a progressive rate in order to build tolerance to those different loads and stresses that you're going to experience out on game day or into practice. Or in the case of my Olympic shooting athletes, putting 250 rounds through your shotgun or spending 4 hours in 2 or 3 positions while shooting a rifle, or standing for that long while holding a pistol out in front of you, which the gun may be a few pounds, but that amount of stress over time can potentially be stressful for the brain and stressful for the nervous system if those tissues have not yet built the tolerance, or your nervous system has not yet built the tolerance to those positions. Okay? We can build those tolerances through training and through movement. And this will increase the threshold for nociception, which is going to allow you to lift more weight. It's going to allow you to endure more training and therefore tolerate more pain, quote unquote pain, right? And discomfort. So in doing so, we're pushing the needle in the right direction. Okay. So there's a line that I like to use with all my clients who come to me in pain, and not just for performance, but it's that pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Okay. Reason being is we have choices, right? We have choices of whether or not we are going to suffer, because we have choices to change our trajectory in life. So when you listen to athletes describe pain, it becomes apparent very quickly that what they are experiencing is simply a signal of stress. It serves as a warning mechanism to some type of threat, whether that be a real threat or a perceived threat. And then this pain invokes a sensation along with, and I'm saying sensation generally here because it can be felt differently among everybody, right? So, and this sensation comes along with a range of different emotional attributes, like based off of your relationships that you have with your loved ones and family and friends, different experiences, different memories, okay? It emerges from the combination and integration of different stimuli in your environment to create a very unique experience to you individually, okay? Great example is one athlete with low stress or low threat levels and who understands the role of pain is likely to recover faster than an athlete who is constantly on edge and who takes the role of the victim maybe and who feels helpless and externalizes blame on others and becomes dependent on others to feel better. The literature is clear on this. The literature shows that when athletes are educated about their pain, symptoms will decrease, function will improve, and anxiety is going to reduce. And they are more motivated to continue training and, more importantly, to continue moving, which then has a positive effect, a positive domino effect to keep moving and to keep reducing levels of stress and pain. Okay? And we've all heard the stories of athletes who continue to play despite an injury, right? That should have, and this essentially shut them down, right? Like a football player with torn knee ligaments. I know a couple of guys who actually played on broken fibulas, so one of the lower leg bones in the NFL, and did not impact their performance whatsoever, didn't feel any pain until afterwards, after the game ended or maybe even weeks later. Or maybe an MMA fighter with a broken hand, or even a service member shot in battle. And this is a very, very common occurrence where, you have a soldier shot in battle who manages to pull his or her own fellow soldiers away from danger. And what their brain did is actually suppressed pain in, it's actually a concept called central modulation, but it serves a protective and adaptive mechanism for survival. It allowed them to not only get themselves, but their fellow soldiers away from danger. Okay, and in and only then, once they cleared the threat levels to safety, did they notice that they were shot or bleeding out, right? And you yourself have probably actually experienced something similar where you suffered a wound or an injury in some high stress moment, but it doesn't even register with you initially, right? Only afterwards, once the nervous system actually calms down from all the excitement, is your attention actually drawn to the acute pain. Like, have you ever noticed or ever found a bruise on your body and not known where it actually came from? It happens all the time. People are like, where'd this black and blue mark come from? I don't remember hitting my leg. Right? So you actually had tissue damage there, but you didn't experience any pain in the moment because it wasn't important to your brain at that time, right? And many of you shotgun shooters have actually been taking recoil blasts to the shoulder for years, right? And I remember my first time shooting a shotgun. I'll never forget it. I was probably, 7, 8 years old, and my crazy uncle took me and my cousin out to one of the stripping pits in Pennsylvania and brought out his, I didn't know it at the time, but a sawed-off side-by-side shotgun. So if many of you know what happens from a physics standpoint when you make the barrel length shorter on a gun, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. And I'll never forget, this old shotgun actually had 2 triggers back when they were made this way. This is an old gun. And I accidentally double triggered, which means that I pulled both triggers at once, set off both shells inside the shotgun, so both barrels went off, and I thought I nearly fucking blew my shoulder to pieces, okay? And of course, that initial blast, I did feel a lot of pain. It was a novel experience to me. My brain was trying to register it and make sense of it. But that did correlate with tissue damage. I was black and blue down into my chest and all the way down into my elbow on my right side, or on my right arm. So you can see there is that, yeah, I experienced tissue damage and I felt pain in that occurrence. I mean, that makes a lot of logical sense with that one. But even so, many of you have been shooting shotguns for years, right? And at first you may have bruised and you may have experienced some level of pain or discomfort, but then, after months to years of training and practice, your body adapted just like mine did, right? And now it could tolerate that level of loading to the shoulder without a painful response. I can go shoot sporting clays and put 250 rounds through my shotgun, and I will walk away from there feeling great. Yet I may still experience some bruising in my shoulder from time to time, depending on a various number of reasons, but I don't actually feel it in the moment because my brain doesn't perceive it as a threat. It wasn't new, it wasn't novel, and I was used to it. If I trained for it, I've adapted to it. So what about this concept then of no pain, no gain? Like we hear this growing up. People made T-shirts about it. The old high school ball coach said that in the weight room, like no pain, no gain, or fear is just pain leaving your body. And what this instills in people is this idea of ignoring pain. So should you ignore pain, right? If you continue to shoot, even though you experience back pain, it's like ignoring the check engine light on your vehicle. Okay. Acute sensitization is a normal process that actually encourages you to change something, encourages you to change the movement, encourages you to change the position or the load actually in order to avoid injuring the tissue. So if something hurts, don't just avoid it or to power through it. We want to learn from it. We want to learn to understand it. We want to listen to your body and seek assistance in order to help find ways to build your movement repertoire and durability to stress. Okay, so if there's this like sharp, knife-like, needle-like pain that you experience, that's not something that you want to ignore. We are okay with lower levels of nagging discomfort, of moving and listening to your body, but trying to figure out what is causing it, and then also building more essentially mobility or movement options and more capacity in your tissues and your movement repertoire to handle that stress moving forward. Okay. So that being said, it is time to master your movement, right? Putting things into a nice little quick bow here, wrapping this thing up, pain is just an interpretation by the brain, plain and simple. That is all. The question then shouldn't be how much pain do you have or where does it hurt? Instead, the right question is to ask why, or I guess the right question to ask is, why has this pain become the most salient element of my focus? Okay, I'm going to say that again. So instead of asking, why am I in so much pain or where does it hurt? I want you to ask yourself the question, or why has this pain become the most single salient element of my focus? So what in your life has brought you to this point? This is a great place to introspect and reflect back on the decisions you made, the thoughts that you have, your perception around pain, the way that you grew up, what your parents and your friends and your teachers and your coaches told you about pain. And write it down. And do you agree with it? And based off of this information that you just heard from me today, do you agree with it, right? At the end of the day, pain educates us on why our movements need improvement. Pain helps us mitigate stress and actually provides insight into our own mental and emotional well-being. The most successful athletes in the world are actually the ones who best understand pain and its relationship to movement and mindset. They possess an internal responsibility for their pain. They don't hand it off to somebody else. They don't become dependent on somebody else for their pain. They take responsibility and ownership of it, and they overcome it by making wise, informed decisions that actually empower their performance. So that educational piece is my main role and my responsibility. It's my job here on this earth. It's my job to help deliver this information to you all so that you can actually make better decisions about your movement health and your vitality. So that being said, I'm actually going to be relaunching my shooting specific training plan here in a couple of weeks. And this course was specifically designed based off my year's experience working with tactical athletes of all different levels and my Olympians of USA shooting. So if you shoot any kind of discipline whatsoever, from sporting clays to trap and ski and any kind of pistol or rifle event, then this course is 100% for you. So I just wanted to thank you all again for taking the time to listen. And if you found this information valuable, please head over to Spotify or to iTunes, wherever you listen, and give this show a 5-star review. So until next time, remember that your perception of pain is rooted in movement. I am Thor.